There comes a moment in your life when you have to stop asking, why aren't they reacting? And start asking, why am I still waiting for their reaction to determine how I feel? Because sometimes the greatest transformation begins when you stop reaching, stop explaining, stop sending the message you have rewritten 17 times, stop checking whether they viewed your story. Stop wondering who they are talking to. Stop trying to prove that you cared. Stop trying to make them understand what they lost. Because there is a strange law of human nature. When you are constantly available, people can become accustomed to your presence. Your attention becomes expected. Your kindness becomes ordinary. Your messages become part of the background noise of their life. But when you withdraw, not as punishment, not as manipulation, but because you finally understand your own worth, something changes. The noise becomes silence. And silence has a way of revealing what noise was hiding. Maybe they act unbothered. Maybe they look completely fine. Maybe they post pictures, laugh with friends, continue their routine, and give the world the impression that nothing changed. But you cannot measure someone's inner world by their outer performance. Some people learned long ago how to hide discomfort behind independence. They learned how to say, I don't care, when what they really mean is, I don't know how to deal with what I feel. They learned how to walk away before vulnerability could expose them. They learned how to create distance before attachment could create fear. And when you disappear from their daily life, they may not immediately chase you. They may become even quieter. Do not mistake silence for certainty. Do not mistake emotional restraint for emotional absence. But here is where you must be careful. Because your purpose is not to disappear so that someone becomes obsessed with you. Your purpose is to disappear from the version of yourself that was begging to be chosen. That is the transformation. You are not here to manipulate someone's nervous system. You are here to master your own. You are not here to make somebody regret losing you. You are here to stop regretting losing yourself. There is a difference, and that difference can change your entire life. You see, when you are constantly pursuing someone who keeps creating distance, you slowly train yourself to believe that love must be earned through effort. You begin thinking, if I explain myself better, they'll understand. If I become more patient, they'll open up. If I give them enough space, they'll come back. If I show them how much I care, they'll finally recognize my value. But sometimes the lesson is not how to get someone to come closer. Sometimes the lesson is learning when to stop moving towards someone who continually moves away. That is where dignity begins. And dignity is not arrogance. Dignity is alignment. It is the quiet decision that says, I can love you without abandoning myself. You can care without chasing. You can miss someone without contacting them. You can forgive someone without reopening the door. You can hope for reconciliation without putting your life on pause. And you can walk away without hatred. That is strength, because real strength does not scream, look what you lost. Real strength quietly says, I finally remembered who I was. And perhaps that is what your absence will reveal. Not necessarily to them, but to you. Because when you remove yourself from constant emotional stimulation, you begin hearing your own thoughts again. You realize how much energy you spent analyzing another person's behavior. You realize how many mornings began with checking your phone, how many nights ended with unanswered questions, how often you confused uncertainty with chemistry, how often you called anxiety love, how often you accepted crumbs because you were hoping they would eventually become a feast, and then something happens. You become tired, not tired of loving, tired of losing yourself. And that exhaustion becomes a doorway. You begin rebuilding. You wake up and remember your purpose. You start taking care of your mind. You start protecting your peace. You start becoming disciplined again. You start praying again. You start creating again. You start becoming the person you were before you made another human being the center of your emotional universe. And slowly, something powerful happens. Their absence stops hurting as much because your own presence starts meaning more. That is when your energy changes. That is when your life changes. And ironically, that may also be when someone who once acted completely unbothered begins noticing the difference. because people often notice the absence of what they previously took for granted only after the pattern is broken. They were used to your message, now there is none. They were used to your availability, now there is none. They were used to knowing you would eventually return. Now you have returned to yourself. And suddenly their mind may begin revisiting moments they had pushed away. A conversation, a laugh, a place, a song, a memory. Something small can unlock something enormous. But remember this, you do not control what happens inside another person's heart. You cannot force realization. You cannot manufacture genuine love. You cannot manipulate someone into emotional maturity. And you should never build your future around waiting for another person's awakening. Let them have their journey. You have yours, maybe they come back, maybe they don't. Maybe they realize your value. Maybe they never do. But your assignment remains the same. Become whole, because your life was never supposed to be a courtroom where you spend every day presenting evidence that you deserved to be loved. You do not have to convince the right person of your value. You do not have to perform for someone who has already decided not to see you. You do not have to become smaller so another person feels comfortable. You do not have to remain emotionally available to someone who only becomes available when they are afraid of losing access to you. And hear this carefully. Someone missing you is not the same as someone being ready for you. Someone regretting losing you is not the same as someone becoming capable of loving you. Someone returning is not automatically reconciliation. Sometimes people return because they miss the comfort you provided. Sometimes they return because loneliness becomes louder. Sometimes they return because your absence wounded their ego. And sometimes they return because they genuinely changed. Your wisdom is learning the difference. Do not be hypnotized by words. Watch patterns, watch consistency, watch accountability, watch actions. Because transformation is not an apology. Transformation is change behavior. And if they ever return, let them meet the version of you that no longer needs them to complete the story. Let them meet someone who has boundaries, someone who can listen without losing discernment, someone who can love without becoming desperate, someone who understands that peace is not something you negotiate away just because someone finally knocks on the door. You are allowed to open the door slowly. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to require consistency. You are allowed to say, I care about you, but I will not return to the same pattern. That is not bitterness. That is wisdom. And if they never return, you still win, because the greatest victory was never making them miss you. The greatest victory was becoming someone who no longer needs to be missed to feel valuable. There is something divine about that kind of surrender. You stop forcing, you stop controlling, you stop trying to manipulate outcomes. You say, God, if this relationship is meant for me, let it return in a healthier form. And if it is not, give me the strength to release it without destroying myself trying to hold it. That prayer changes everything. Because now you are no longer asking for a specific person at any cost. You are asking for alignment. You are asking for wisdom. You are asking for peace. You are asking for what is truly meant for your life. And sometimes the door you desperately wanted opened was never the door you were supposed to walk through. Sometimes rejection is redirection. Sometimes silence is protection. Sometimes distance is preparation. And sometimes losing someone is the painful mechanism through which you finally find yourself. So let them act unbothered. Let them post. Let them smile. Let them remain silent. Let them live their life. You have a life to build. You have a purpose to fulfill. You have gifts that cannot remain buried because someone refused to recognize them. You have dreams that existed before that relationship and will exist after it. Your future does not need permission from your past. Stand up, get your energy back. Put your attention where it belongs, on your character, your discipline, your faith, your mission, your family, your craft, your health, your future. And most importantly, your relationship with yourself and with God. Because when you stop chasing what keeps running from you, you create room for what can actually walk beside you. When you stop begging for clarity, you become clear. When you stop demanding closure, you begin creating closure. When you stop trying to make someone choose you, you finally choose yourself, and that choice is sacred. Maybe one day your absence will change everything for them. But let your absence change everything for you first. Let it change your standards. Let it change your habits. Let it change your confidence. Let it change your relationship with silence. Let it change your relationship with solitude. Let it change your relationship with God. Let it turn heartbreak into wisdom. Let it turn rejection into direction. Let it turn pain into purpose. Because the strongest person in the room is not always the one who can make someone chase them. Sometimes it is the person who can walk away peacefully. No revenge, no performance, no desperate final message. No attempt to make someone jealous, just peace, just purpose, just faith, and a quiet understanding that what is truly meant for you will never require you to destroy yourself to keep it. So if someone is acting unbothered, let them. You do not need to expose their feelings. You do not need to decode every silence. You do not need to monitor every movement. You do not need to prove your absence is powerful. Your responsibility is simpler. Become powerful in your own presence. Become so grounded that silence no longer scares you. Become so disciplined that loneliness cannot derail you. Become so spiritually anchored that another person's attention cannot determine your worth. And one day you may look back and realize the moment they lost access to you was not the moment your life became empty. It was the moment your life became yours again. And that is when everything changes, not because they finally noticed, but because you finally did. You finally noticed your worth. You finally noticed your purpose. You finally noticed the life waiting for you beyond the door of emotional dependence. And when you recognize that, you stop asking who misses you. You start asking what you are becoming. That is the question that matters. Because your future is not built by who regrets losing you. Your future is built by who you decide to become after you stop losing yourself. So walk forward, quickly, faithfully, powerfully, and let your absence be the evidence that you finally chose your own life, not to punish anyone, not to manipulate anyone, but because you finally understood the truth. You were never supposed to chase someone into loving you. You were supposed to become so deeply rooted in your purpose that love, when it comes, meets you standing, not begging. And if someone is meant to walk beside you, let them rise to meet you there. If they are not, keep walking. Because sometimes the greatest blessing is not getting the person back. Sometimes the greatest blessing is getting yourself back. And once you have yourself again, you are no longer afraid of who leaves. You become grateful for who stays. You become patient with what is developing. You become peaceful about what is ending. And you trust that what God has for you will not require you to betray yourself to receive it. That is freedom. That is maturity. That is power. And that is the moment your absence truly changes everything. Not because someone else finally feels your loss, but because you finally stopped being lost yourself. Sometimes your presence becomes so consistent that people stop recognizing its value. Not because you are not valuable, but because human beings can become accustomed to what is always available. When someone knows you will always answer, always explain, always forgive, always check in, and always come back, your presence can become predictable. And when something becomes predictable, people can stop consciously appreciating it. That is why your absence can reveal what your presence could never expose. When you were there every day, they did not have to wonder what life felt like without you. Your attention was available. Your energy was available. Your encouragement was available. Your patience was available. Even your silence was something they could rely on because they knew eventually you might reach out again. But when you stop chasing, the pattern changes. Suddenly, there is no message waiting, no explanation, no emotional rescue, no familiar person trying to repair what they refuse to address. And that silence creates space. Space for memories, space for questions, space for reflection, space for realization. But understand something important. Your absence should never be a strategy designed to make another person suffer. If you disappear simply to provoke a reaction, you are still emotionally controlled by their response. You are still living according to their behavior. True absence is different. True absence happens when you finally decide that your peace is more important than proving your importance. You stop saying, "How can I make them miss me?" And you begin asking, "How can I stop abandoning myself?" That question changes everything, because the moment you stop chasing someone, you begin seeing the relationship differently. You start noticing how much of your energy was spent trying to maintain something that required two people but was being carried by one. You realize that you were not just missing them, you were missing the version of yourself that existed before the uncertainty. You were constantly waiting for a notification, an apology, a sign, a change in behavior. And every time nothing happened, your mind created another explanation. But eventually, you understand that you cannot build peace around another person's inconsistency. So you step back, not dramatically, not with revenge, not with announcements. You simply stop forcing. And that is powerful, because silence removes your ability to control the outcome. You are no longer trying to convince someone to recognize your value. You are allowing reality to reveal itself. If they care, they have space to demonstrate it. If they do not, you have space to accept it. Either way, you receive something valuable, truth. And truth, even when painful, is more powerful than living inside an illusion. Your absence may make someone realize what they lost. It may make them revisit memories they ignored. It may make them recognize how much emotional safety, loyalty, or kindness you brought into their life. But whether they realize it or not, your absence has already accomplished something greater. It brought you back to yourself. And sometimes that is the real miracle, because the goal was never to make someone chase you. The goal was to stop chasing what was costing you your peace. When you understand that, absence is no longer a weapon. It becomes a boundary. It becomes self-respect. It becomes surrender. And it becomes the quiet declaration that says, "I can love you, but I will not lose myself trying to make you love me." That is when your absence stops being about them and starts becoming about you. Sometimes the person who looks the most unbothered is carrying the most unresolved emotion beneath the surface. The outside world sees silence, distance, independence, and control. But what happens inside another person's mind cannot always be measured by what they choose to show. Some people become experts at hiding what they feel. They learn to smile when they are hurting. They learn to become quiet when they are overwhelmed. They learn to walk away when closeness becomes uncomfortable. They learn to say, "I'm fine," because admitting that they care feels more threatening than pretending they do not. And this is where you must develop wisdom. Do not assume that someone's silence automatically means they never cared. But at the same time, do not create an imaginary story about hidden feelings just because you desperately want one to be true. Both extremes can trap you. You cannot see inside another person's heart. You can only observe patterns, choices, and actions. Someone may miss you and still choose distance. Someone may care about you and still be emotionally unavailable. Someone may think about you and still not be ready to build a healthy relationship. That is why your peace cannot depend on decoding another person's emotions. When someone acts completely unbothered after you leave, your first instinct may be to think, "How can they move on so easily?" But people process emotions differently. One person may talk, another may withdraw, one person may cry, another may become busy, one may reach out immediately, another may bury themselves in work, friends, entertainment, or silence. The absence of visible emotion does not automatically mean the absence of emotion, but here is the deeper lesson. You are not responsible for uncovering what someone refuses to communicate. You do not need to become an investigator of another person's heart. You do not need to analyze every social media post. You do not need to interpret every song they share. You do not need to wonder whether a photograph was secretly meant for you. You do not need to search for hidden messages inside ordinary behavior. Because when you become obsessed with decoding them, you lose connection with yourself. And that is exactly what you must refuse to do. Let people have their inner world. Let them process what they need to process. Let them confront whatever emotions your absence brings into their life. If they miss you, they will have to decide what that means. If they regret something, They will have to decide whether they are willing to take responsibility. If they want you back, they will have to demonstrate that desire through mature action. You do not have to pull those emotions out of them. This is where emotional strength begins. You stop trying to control another person's internal experience and start mastering your own. You realize that your job is not to make someone feel your absence. Your job is to use your absence as an opportunity to reconnect with your purpose. Maybe they are struggling internally, maybe they are not. Maybe they think about you every night, maybe they rarely think about you at all. Your responsibility remains unchanged. Build yourself, protect your peace. Strengthen your character, deepen your faith, become disciplined, become emotionally grounded, because the most dangerous thing you can do is make your healing dependent on evidence that someone else is hurting. If you need them to suffer before you feel valuable, you are still giving them power. Your value existed before they recognized it. Your worth does not increase because they miss you. Your worth does not decrease because they remain silent. You were valuable when they were close. You were valuable when they walked away. And you remain valuable whether they return or never come back. That is the truth you must anchor yourself to. Sometimes God removes the noise so you can finally hear the lesson. Maybe the lesson is not, how do I get them back? Maybe the lesson is, why did I believe I needed someone else's reaction to confirm my worth? That question can change your life, because once you stop needing emotional proof from another person, you become free. You can love without chasing. You can care without controlling. You can remember without returning. And you can walk forward without needing to know what is happening inside someone else's heart. Let their silence belong to them. Let your growth belong to you. And if their inner conflict eventually leads them toward honest communication, accountability, and healthy action, you can evaluate that moment with wisdom. But until then, keep walking. Because you do not need to understand every hidden feeling to understand one simple truth. Your peace is worth protecting. And the moment you stop trying to decode someone else's silence, you finally create enough silence within yourself to hear where your own life is calling you next. There is a moment when you have to stop trying to trigger somebody else's emotions and start transforming your own life. That moment is the difference between emotional dependence and emotional freedom. Because if your entire strategy is built around making someone miss you, you are still centered on them. You may stop texting, but your mind is still texting. You may stop calling, but internally you are still waiting for the phone to ring. You may stop checking their profile, but you are still wondering whether they checked yours. That is not freedom. That is silence on the outside and attachment on the inside. Real transformation begins when you stop asking, what can I do to make them realize what they lost? And start asking, what can I do to become the strongest, wisest, most peaceful version of myself? That question shifts your entire identity. You stop performing for someone who is absent and start building for the future that is still waiting for you. You begin waking up with a purpose that has nothing to do with whether somebody responds to you. You exercise because your body deserves strength. You learn because your mind deserves expansion. You work because your gifts deserve expression. You pray because your soul needs alignment. You create because your life has something meaningful to contribute. You become disciplined because your future requires a version of you that your past has not yet seen, and slowly the emotional obsession loses its grip. You realize that your greatest revenge is not making someone jealous. It is becoming unavailable to the version of yourself that once begged for attention. That is powerful, because when you transform yourself, you are no longer waiting for somebody else's behavior to determine your emotional temperature. If they contact you, you are calm. If they do not, you are calm. If they remember you, you are grateful. If they forget you, you continue. Your stability is no longer controlled by their choices. That is emotional maturity. And understand this, transformation does not mean pretending you do not care. You can care deeply and still move forward. You can miss someone and still choose yourself. You can have memories without making those memories your home. You can wish someone well without returning to a situation that destroyed your peace. That is the kind of strength that cannot be faked. The world often teaches you to chase validation. Get the message, get the apology, get the attention, get the person back. But there is a higher form of victory. Become so deeply connected to your own purpose that validation becomes secondary. You no longer need someone to regret losing you because you no longer regret choosing yourself. And perhaps that is the greatest change your absence can create. Not in them, in you, because when you stop trying to trigger their emotions, you reclaim your emotional energy. Think about how much mental space you were giving away. Hours spent wondering, days spent waiting, nights spent replaying conversations. You were taking your precious attention and placing it inside a situation you could not control. But attention is energy, and wherever you repeatedly place your attention, you strengthen that part of your life. So take your attention back. Take it back from the unanswered message. Take it back from the imagined conversation. Take it back from the social media screen. Take it back from the question, do they miss me? And redirect it toward the question, what is God asking me to build now? Maybe there is a dream you abandoned. Maybe there is a skill you need to develop. Maybe there is a business waiting for your courage. Maybe there is a family member who needs your presence. Maybe there is a version of yourself you have neglected for years. Your heartbreak does not have to become the end of your story. It can become the beginning of your discipline. The pain can become a teacher. The silence can become a classroom. The distance can become a doorway. And one day you may realize that you were never supposed to spend your life trying to make someone understand your value. You were supposed to discover it so deeply within yourself that their recognition became unnecessary. That is transformation, not becoming cold, not becoming cruel, not pretending you never cared. Becoming whole, so let them have their emotions, let them have their silence, let them have their uncertainty. You have something far more important to manage: your life, your purpose, your character, your future. And if one day they return, let them encounter a person who has grown, not someone who has been sitting in the same emotional place waiting for their arrival. If they never return, let your growth still be worth it. Because your transformation should never depend on whether somebody comes back to witness it. Do it because you were created for more. Do it because your life is bigger than one relationship. Do it because your future deserves your attention. And do it because there is a divine principle that never changes. When you stop trying to control what is outside of you and begin mastering what is within you, your power returns. That is when absence stops being a tactic. It becomes freedom. And that freedom is worth more than anyone's reaction. Silence has a strange power. When you are constantly talking, explaining, checking in, asking questions, and trying to keep a connection alive, there is very little room for the other person to hear themselves. Your words fill the space. Your effort fills the space. Your presence fills the space. But when you step back, something changes. The silence becomes a mirror, and mirrors do not create anything. They simply reveal what is already there. When you stop reaching out, you are not forcing someone to think about you. You are simply removing the noise that was preventing them from thinking clearly. Suddenly, memories can surface. Conversations can replay. Small moments can become meaningful. Things they dismissed before may begin to look different from a distance. But understand this carefully. Silence is not a manipulation technique. Silence should never mean, I am going quiet so they panic. That is still attachment. That is still control. Real silence says, I have said what I needed to say. I have done what I could do. Now I am allowing reality to speak. And reality speaks differently when you stop interfering with it. When you are constantly available, someone can avoid confronting the consequences of their choices because they know you are still there. They can withdraw and return whenever they want. They can ignore difficult conversations because you keep reopening the door. But when you step away with dignity, they encounter something they cannot negotiate with. Your absence. There is no message to distract them. No emotional explanation to soften the situation. No reassurance that everything will be okay. They are left with their own thoughts, and sometimes that is where realization begins. Maybe they remember how you used to encourage them when they doubted themselves. Maybe they remember the way you listened. Maybe they remember the patience you showed. Maybe they remember the ordinary moments that once seemed insignificant. That is the strange thing about human memory. Sometimes we do not understand the value of a moment while we are living inside it. We understand it after the moment becomes a memory, but your responsibility is not to sit around waiting for that realization. Your responsibility is to continue living. Because silence becomes powerful only when you are genuinely moving forward. If you are silent while spending every hour checking whether they have contacted you, then the silence is only external. Your mind is still shouting. You are still waiting. You are still emotionally connected to the outcome. True silence begins inside. It is the moment you say, I don't need to know what they are thinking today. You don't need to know whether they miss you. You don't need to know whether they regret anything. You don't need to know whether they are looking at your profile. You can allow unanswered questions to remain unanswered. That is maturity. And there is something deeply spiritual about that kind of surrender. Sometimes God does not give you immediate answers, because immediate answers would keep you dependent on the situation. Instead, you are given space to grow, space to detach, space to become stronger, space to discover that peace does not require complete information. You do not need to know how their story ends to continue writing yours. Let silence reveal what it reveals. If someone truly values the relationship, they may eventually communicate. If they have regrets, they may eventually acknowledge them. If they have grown, their actions may eventually demonstrate it. And if nothing happens, silence has still given you an answer. Not every answer arrives as a message. Some answers arrive as patterns, some arrive as distance, some arrive as peace. Some arrive when you finally stop asking the same question. That is why you should never fear silence. Silence is not always rejection. Sometimes silence is preparation. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is clarity. And sometimes it is the space in which two people finally understand what they could not understand while surrounded by emotional noise. But regardless of what another person discovers in that silence, make sure you discover something too. Discover yourself, discover your standards, discover your boundaries, discover your purpose, discover the person you become when you no longer need constant reassurance. Because the greatest mirror is not the one you hold up to another person. It is the one you hold up to yourself. Ask yourself, who was I becoming while I was chasing this? Why did I accept uncertainty for so long? What did I ignore because I was afraid of losing them? What part of myself did I abandon just to keep someone close? Those questions may hurt, but they can also heal you, because once you see the truth, you can change it. And that is why silence can become sacred. It creates room for honesty, room for reflection, room for growth, room for God to redirect your steps. So do not use silence to punish anyone. Use silence to listen. Listen to your intuition. Listen to your values. Listen to your purpose. Listen to the quiet voice inside you that has been saying, you deserve peace too. Then walk forward without bitterness, without revenge, without needing to prove anything. Because when you stop filling every silence, the truth eventually has room to speak. And sometimes the most important truth you hear is not about whether they miss you. It is the realization that you no longer need their reaction to know that you mattered. There is a point in life where you have to understand that divine timing is not the same thing as your timing. You may want an answer today. You may want someone to return today. You may want an apology, a conversation, or a second chance right now. But sometimes the delay is not denial. Sometimes the delay is protection, preparation, or redirection. And this is where desperation becomes dangerous. When you are desperate for a particular outcome, you can begin compromising things you should never compromise. Your dignity, your boundaries, your peace, your self-respect. You start thinking, maybe if I send one more message, maybe if I explain it differently, maybe if I apologize even though I did nothing wrong, maybe if I become more available, they will finally choose me. But love should never require you to destroy yourself just to keep another person. There is a difference between fighting for something meaningful and forcing something that is no longer flowing naturally. Fighting for love can mean communicating honestly, taking responsibility, learning from mistakes, and giving a relationship a genuine chance. Forcing love means chasing someone who repeatedly shows you that they do not want to participate. One is courage, the other is fear. Fear says, I have to hold on because I may never find anything else. Faith says, if this is meant for me, I do not have to destroy my peace to receive it. That is a powerful shift because when you trust divine timing, you stop trying to manipulate outcomes. You stop calculating how long you should remain silent. You stop wondering which message will create the strongest reaction. You stop creating jealousy. You stop trying to appear happier than you are. You stop performing. You simply live. And living is powerful. You wake up. You work. You grow. You pray. You build. You serve. You become stronger. You allow your life to continue even while your heart is still healing. That is faith in action. You are saying, I don't know what the future holds, but I refuse to sacrifice my present while waiting for it. Maybe that person returns. Maybe they don't. Maybe the relationship is restored. Maybe another door opens that you could never have imagined. Your job is not to predict the outcome. Your job is to become ready for whatever outcome is aligned with your highest good. Sometimes the person you are desperate to get back is not the person you actually need. Sometimes you are attached to the memory rather than the reality. You remember their potential. You remember the good moments. You remember how it felt in the beginning, but you forget how often you felt uncertain. You forget how many times you questioned your value. You forget the nights you were emotionally exhausted. You forget how often you were trying to convince someone to meet you halfway. This is why divine wisdom requires discernment. Not everything you desire is automatically meant for you. Sometimes God allows something to leave because holding it would prevent you from receiving something healthier. And when you understand this, you stop begging closed doors to open. You stop chasing people who are committed to distance. You stop confusing attachment with destiny. You stop believing that losing someone means losing your future. Your future is bigger than one person. Your purpose is bigger than one relationship. Your life is bigger than one unanswered message. And perhaps the greatest act of faith is being willing to say, if this relationship is meant to return, let it return with maturity, honesty, consistency, and peace. But if it is not meant for me, give me the courage to release it. That prayer requires strength because you are surrendering control. You are no longer saying, God, give me exactly what I want. You are saying, God, give me what is right. There is a profound difference. And sometimes what is right will surprise you. It may be reconciliation. It may be closure. It may be a completely new chapter. It may be a season of solitude where you discover who you are without needing someone else's validation. Whatever it is, trust that your life does not end because someone walks away. You are still here. You still have breath. You still have gifts. You still have purpose. You still have time to become the person you were created to become. So stop chasing timelines. Stop asking, when will they realize? Ask instead, what am I becoming while I wait? That question puts your power back where it belongs. Maybe your greatest blessing is not getting them back. Maybe your greatest blessing is becoming so emotionally grounded that whether they return or not, you remain at peace. That is divine strength. You do not have to force what is meant for you. You do not have to manipulate someone into loving you. You do not have to abandon your standards to keep a connection alive. What belongs in your life should be able to meet you in truth. And if someone returns, let them return through action, not promises. Let them demonstrate growth. Let them show consistency. Let them take responsibility. Let them meet the new boundaries you have built. And if they do not return, keep walking. Do not interpret their absence as God's rejection of you. Sometimes a closed door is simply an invitation to stop standing in front of it. Your life is moving. Your purpose is moving. Your future is moving. Move with it. Trust the timing. Protect your peace. Relish desperation. And remember, What is truly aligned with your life will never require you to become smaller, weaker, or more desperate just to keep it. You do not need to chase what God has already ordained for you. You need to become ready to receive it. Your absence should never be a weapon designed to make somebody panic. It should be the natural consequence of growth. There is a tremendous difference between disappearing to manipulate someone and stepping away because you finally understand that your peace, dignity, and future matter too. If you leave just to make someone miss you, then your attention is still centered on them. You may not be sending messages, but you are still waiting for a reaction. You may not be calling, but you are still checking your phone every few minutes. You may look strong on the outside, but internally you are still asking, did they notice? That is not freedom. That is another form of attachment. Real growth sounds different. It says, I am not leaving because I want you to suffer. I am stepping away because I refuse to keep participating in something that is damaging my peace. That decision does not require an announcement. It does not require a dramatic goodbye. It does not require a social media performance. It simply requires clarity. You recognize that love without boundaries can become self-abandonment. You recognize that patience without limits can become tolerance for unhealthy patterns. You recognize that forgiveness does not mean unlimited access. And you recognize that caring about someone does not mean accepting everything they do. This is where maturity begins. You stop asking, how can I make them understand what they lost? And you start asking, what kind of life am I building now that I have stopped chasing? That question changes your direction. Instead of trying to make someone jealous, you build confidence. Instead of trying to make them wonder where you are, you create a life worth being present in. Instead of posting things to get their attention, you start doing things because they matter to you. You stop performing happiness and start cultivating peace. That is the difference between pretending to move on and actually moving forward. And moving forward does not mean you suddenly stop caring. Healing is not amnesia. You may still remember them. You may still have moments when you miss them. You may still wonder what could have happened if things had been different. That is human. But the difference is that the memory no longer controls the direction of your life. You can remember and still move. You can love and still have boundaries. You can forgive and still choose distance. You can hope and still refuse to wait. That is emotional freedom. And if that person ever notices your absence, let them notice it naturally. Do not manufacture it. Do not use another person to create jealousy. Do not intentionally appear with someone else just to provoke a reaction. Do not create fake happiness for an audience of one, because when you live for another person's reaction, you are giving them control over your identity. Your growth should be real, even if they never see it. Your success should matter, even if they never congratulate you. Your peace should matter, even if they never understand why you walked away. Your transformation belongs to you. And perhaps this is the deepest principle. You cannot control who recognizes your value, but you can control whether you continue living as though you have none. You have to become the person who respects their own boundaries. The person who does not beg for basic communication. The person who does not chase inconsistent affection. The person who does not confuse temporary attention with genuine commitment. The person who understands that being wanted is not enough. You need to be respected. You need to be valued. You need consistency. You need emotional safety. And you need a relationship where both people are willing to grow. If someone returns, do not immediately assume that their return means everything has changed. Look deeper. Have their actions changed? Have their patterns changed? Have they taken responsibility? Are they communicating differently? Are they willing to build something healthier? Because missing you is an emotion, change is a decision, and decisions are demonstrated through behavior. So if someone comes back, let them meet your growth. Let them understand that access to you is no longer automatic, not because you are punishing them, because you have learned something. You have learned that your heart deserves protection. You have learned that your time is valuable. You have learned that peace is not something you should repeatedly sacrifice for temporary connection. And if they never come back, your growth still matters. Because the purpose of your transformation was never to become irresistible to them. The purpose was to become aligned with yourself. There is something deeply powerful about reaching a place where you can say, I loved you. I wanted things to work. I hoped you would choose me. But I will not spend the rest of my life trying to convince you. That is not giving up. That is surrendering what you cannot control. You release the outcome without releasing your standards. You release the person without releasing your future. You release the relationship without releasing your capacity to love. And you place the unknown in God's hands. Maybe the story continues. Maybe it ends. Maybe there is another chapter you cannot see yet. But whatever happens, you will not be the same person who was desperately chasing an answer. You will be stronger. You will be wiser. You will be more grounded. You will understand that your worth was never determined by someone's ability to recognize it. So let your absence be honest. Let it come from growth. Let it come from peace. Let it come from self-respect. And if someone notices, let them. If someone misses you, let them. If someone regrets losing you, let them process that truth. But do not build your life around their reaction. Build it around your purpose. Because the greatest transformation is not when someone finally realizes they cannot replace you. The greatest transformation is when you realize you never needed to be irreplaceable. You simply needed to be yourself, whole, grounded, purposeful, faithful, and free. That is when your absence becomes meaningful, not because it changed another person's heart, but because it changed the direction of your own.